Welcome to our podcast. I'm Fred Scholl. I'm the director of the Masters in Cybersecurity program at Quinnipiac University. And what we do periodically is talk to experts in the field about trends in the cybersecurity industry that will affect your potential employment or jobs or career opportunities in the future. And today we are very happy to have Dr. Chase Cunningham. Welcome, Dr. Cunningham.
Hey, thanks for having me.
He is an expert in the topic of cyber war. And if you've been in the security field, you've kind of been thinking about cyber war for a long time. What is it? It's not too well defined. People talk about cyber Pearl Harbor and things of that nature. And so I thought it's a good opportunity to kind of catch up with Dr. Cunningham and try to understand better what is cyber war, what are the threats, what are the defenses, what kinds of skills are going to be needed if you're going to be defending whatever assets need to be defended. And before I go any further, Dr. Cunningham just published a very interesting book, Cyber Warfare, Truth, Tactics, and Strategies. We'll reference that in the podcast. And he's also an analyst at a distinguished analyst company serving IT professionals kind of worldwide. So can we start off, Chase, with what is cyber war? Do you have kind of how do you distinguish cyber war from just hackers or Zoom bombers or stuff like that?
Yeah, well, I really think kind of the point of cyber war is you can't necessarily disassociate the two because of the sort of dynamic nature and the transitory space that cyberspace really is. You don't necessarily know the difference between what is just hacker problem and what is cyber warfare tactics. And that's why really when I wrote the book, I tried to get into the history of this and the truth around it to give people some understanding of it's hard to differentiate. However, it's the outcome that the individual or entity or organization is desiring that actually equals a warfare engagement.
Okay, and so as I mentioned, there's always been all this talk about a cyber Pearl Harbor, and so should we as security professionals think if we haven't had a cyber Pearl Harbor that everything's okay? That is there a cyber war going on now, I guess is my question.
Yeah, there's an active cyber war that's going on every second of every day. This is, interestingly enough, cyberspace is the only space where every device, man, woman, child, application is residing on an open battlefield. And what I mean by that is we are engaged in a conflict zone simply by logging into something on the internet. It's essentially the same thing as if you went to a hot zone in Iraq in 2003 and just started strolling down the street. That's kind of what's going on. You would have metal flying over your head, and it would be a very dangerous place to be in. But in cyberspace, because we don't necessarily feel kinetic impacts, we're not usually aware of the reality of the space in which we operate.
That's a very good description. So if you read just newspaper articles, there's constant discussion of Russia, North Korea. Do we have a good idea of who all these threat actors are? I mean, they've kind of been identified. Do you think there are more out there? What does the future hold over the next couple of years in terms of more threat actors? Is this a field where, quote, cyber terrorists can come into play? Or what does the threat landscape look like in terms of threat actors?
Yeah, so it continues to evolve. If you kind of go back maybe a decade ago, 2010-ish timeframe when this was becoming a common thing, it was really around nation states were doing it, North Korea, China, Russia, those US, those organizations, because they had the capability and the understanding and the tooling. Well, as it has evolved, just like in regular warfare, now we're at a place where everyone can kind of get engaged in this. You have criminal organizations, you have nonprofit organizations, you have just hacker tactics that are going on, and it's become a more open battlefield environment. And where we're going with this is it used to be about attacking infrastructure, attacking finances, trying to degrade operational capability with sort of concrete attacks on assets. in the future, where we're going is social media, video, audio, all these things that we use that are now commonplace will become sort of weaponized attacks on the very fabric of reality, which sounds crazy dystopian, but I mean, it's the truth. Like, we derive our reality right now based on our interactions with machines and video and audio and the internet. If you modify or hack that, you're literally changing people's reality.
So that sounds pretty scary. How do we defend against that, and who does defend against it? Because if you have sort of a well-defined battlefield, if you have obvious adversaries, so now you're talking about the battlefields everywhere, and you're going up against individuals, I guess, right? Rather than, a power plant or something like that. So what are the what are the layers of defense that, I mean, is there a role for individuals to be part of this cyber war defense? Is there a role for businesses? Is there a role for government? What things would you focus on to defend against this?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, I think the good thing, if you can find a good thing really about this space, is that just like everyone is engaged in a combat zone, everyone can ultimately be engaged in combat action, if you will. And part of that is what we need is more human capital to come into the market that can help drive responses and fixes to these problems. Because while it is a human issue to be affected in how we interact with online machines and those type of things, those can be fixed with really good engineering. And so what we need to do is get past some of the problems we have with speed of application development and those type of things.
Do you think the average person, you talked about get more people into the field. I think of like more people getting security certifications, getting master's degrees, things like that. Do you think, is there a role in this cyber warfare defense for the average user that doesn't want to become a cybersecurity professional, or are they just sitting around and waiting for other people to kind of defend them?
Well, you're engaged in it whether you kind of like it or not. So, the average person should honestly take a position of it's in my own best interest to have an understanding of the space in which I operate and to know the sort of best practices for everybody. Just like, if you were going to go walking through a major city, you would know good ideas are like walk in well-lit areas, be in a place where you can, leave if you need to, those type of things. Like, just common sense, relatively intelligent practices can help you, not be a victim.
That's a very good way to put it. So I kind of think about maybe the frontier days when the country was founded. People kind of had to defend their own property, their own towns. So are we kind of going back to that era in this cyber warfare space potentially, or something like that?
Yeah, to some degree. And I mean, if you kind of go to March 13th of this year was when the whole world kind of turned upside down, and now we're all remote. We're not working, inside of buildings and whatnot. I mean, you are on the frontier, which is a great analogy. And you really are kind of responsible to some degree for taking care of your home front. Now obviously you've got support from the cavalry, hopefully, if you need it. But you should be prepared to repel borders if the need arises.
Obviously, we're in the middle of this pandemic. What effect might this have on cyber war activity? So increase, stay the same, change? Obviously, the planet is changing a lot. Can you envision any changes in cyber war tactics, strategies, incidents for the next year or two?
Yeah, I mean, this is honestly is going to be an exponential increase in the severity of attacks because of the fact that what was once somewhat well protected inside of the castle and moat sort of approach now has spilled out onto the open frontier, to use your association. And now all these people that aren't security professionals, don't have IT engineering, don't know how to set up a network, those type of things are mandated to basically turn on their computer and get online and do whatever they were doing. And for the bad guys, that is a perfect storm of opportunity. So, they'll continue to go after those easy, sort of slow gazelles, if you will.
Right. Do you think that on the attack side, kind of the threat actor side, assuming there's going to be a huge amount of economic disruption, is that potentially going to give rise to more attacks, or maybe those? I don't know. What are your thoughts there? Is there a?
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at what's going on with the DoD, which is considered to be one of the hardest infrastructures there is, they've had to figure out how to enable a remote workforce in a couple of months that they never thought they would have to do. So all those nation states, all those adversaries, the people that make money off of this and have criminal enterprises and government focuses, have an opportunity to escalate attacks and more, where they once might have had a few hundred opportunities. Now there are thousands of them. So it will continue to get worse before it gets better. We talk a lot about this pandemic of flattening the curve. Unfortunately, the curve in this space won't be flattening out for quite a while.
So let's just close with your book on cyber warfare. It's several hundred pages, looks like 300 some pages. What would be the best target audiences? Who did you write it for? Obviously, several different kinds of people could read it. If people are looking for a book on this topic, who would be the best fit to read it?
I wrote it really for people that are on sort of two levels. One, folks that are interested in understanding from the layperson's perspective what this whole cyber warfare thing is all about and how that all plays and what the reality of that space is. And on the other side, for the people that are going to be or are in defensive sort of posture for infrastructure for the future, to understand what's coming their way. And I mean, I've had a lot of people tell me that while the book is a technical book for technical readers, it reads a lot like, some parts of it read like spy thriller. So, maybe it's not totally boring.
No, it's not. It's actually quite scary. So I've read some of the chapters. But anyway, so thank you all for watching. Thank you, Dr. Cunningham, for sharing your thoughts. I think this is a very scary topic, and I hope the curve does flatten. I'm not so sure it will, but we all need to be prepared for risk, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things too that, just last point really is, it's be educated and be aware. Don't have to necessarily be afraid. It's just like with anything else, be smart, know your basics and do things that will keep you safe, helps everybody.
Very good. With that, I'll close. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.